One of my big messages to families is that there's always something you can be doing. There's always something you can do, and that could be simply just educating yourself. You might not always be able to impact change in that person using, but there's always other things you can be doing that can be helping you prepare. And if there is that moment of clarity, that moment of insight that person using has, that they want to do something different, wow, what a difference it would be if you were prepared for that.
You're ready.
Yeah. You were ready.
Substance use disorder touches all our lives, and often we feel hopeless or frustrated in our pursuit to understand how and why it happens.
Welcome to APC Recovery Cafe, where we discuss the topics and trends around substance use, provide education and resources, offer recovery support, and also discuss prevention tactics, all through the stories of the people who have been there.
We invite you to grab your favorite coffee or tea and join us for a variety of guests that will bring understanding, information, connection, and hope.
Together, we can break the stigma and pave a brighter future for each other.
Hey folks, welcome to this episode of APC Recovery Cafe. I'm Art Wimberly. I'm a person in long-term recovery and a volunteer at the Addiction Prevention Coalition. And today in the studio, we have the executive director and my wife, Carrie Wimberly.
Good morning, Art.
Morning.
Glad to be here. Particularly excited about today because we have with us Patty Sykstus. She is the president of Not One More Alabama, and we're going to hear a lot more about that, but mostly she's my friend in prevention and everything else. We love getting together, working together. Haven't seen you for a while. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you. A little bit.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So we always start the same way, and we get people their beverage of choice, and we see a lovely Hardee's cup.
Track.
So what's in that, Patty?
That is unsweet tea.
Unsweet tea.
Is that a popular choice?
Never has.
Never come up.
And I'm pretty sure it violates Southern hospitality in some way.
It probably does. Well, that's because I'm from California
Okay.
originally.
Okay, so is there a story behind the love of unsweet tea?
There's a little, yes, there's always a story behind everything. Yes, so I grew up in California, and my grandparents lived up in the high desert in Apple Valley, Victorville area. And, of course, super hot up there, and we would go spend our summers up there as kids. And my grandma every morning would put a big glass jug of tea and make sun tea every day, and that's pretty much what we all drank all day long. So she did have some kind of sweetener back in the day. Don't know what it is. I don't think it's on the market anymore. Probably is not safe or healthy, but we would sweeten it then, but she wouldn't let us use very much. So it was unsweet tea it was. So yeah, I kind of grew up on sun tea and just kind of my go-to, and I enjoy that. I'm not a coffee drinker. My number one preference, not that this is of interest to anybody, but is Diet Coke. I would really drink that all day long if possible.
Wow, okay.
And I have before drank that all day long, but trying to make better choices, and I think unsweet tea is probably on the spectrum of beverages a better choice.
So
Spectrum getting a little bit better.
A little better than Diet Coke.
So tell us, Not One More Alabama.
Yes.
Tell us what it's about. What is it there for?
All right, so Not One More Alabama is, we're actually a chapter of a national organization that started out in Simi Valley, California, with a man named Pat Montoya, just a super interesting guy out there who saw a need in his community and created this organization. And I think there's maybe 12, 14 chapters around the country, they all kind of have a little different flavors. So parallel to that story, I have a good friend of mine, Shannon Roberts, and she and I met about 7 or 8 years ago, and just shared our stories, kind of how we'd gotten to where we were. And we just kept talking about how, gosh, we've learned so much. There's just been so much in our journey that's gotten us here that what a waste to just kind of do
Keep it
nothing
to
with
yourself,
that,
yeah.
and not, and we would help people along the way as people would call or ask a question. But we just both had this nagging feeling like, we need to do something with this information. So we came up with the idea of starting a nonprofit, and there really wasn't much happening like that in our area at the time up in North Alabama. And so we felt like there was a space for that. And so we decided to do it, but of course, first thing, well, what are we going to call it? So we started coming up with some different names, and we came up with the idea of Not One More. And we thought, genius, we are geniuses. Look what we have done. And then we went and Googled Not One More, and there's not one more unsweet tea drinkers, and not one more, there's not one more everything, not one more pretty much anything you can think of. There's a Not One More organization to reflect that somewhere out there, not related to our Not One More. And so we realized we were not terribly ingenious with that. But while we were doing that, we found Not One More out in California, and we loved their logo, and it just kind of spoke to us. And so we started researching them a little bit more and found that they had some chapters. And we were like, you know what, that would make a lot of sense to join in on something that's already being done and not completely start from scratch. Neither of us had any clue how to start a nonprofit organization. We just knew we had a passion. We knew we had a mission, but really had no idea what the map was to get there. So we thought, this makes a lot of sense. Let's start a little higher up than very bottom. So that's what we did. So we joined forces with them, and it's a very loose relationship in the sense that all the chapters pretty much run autonomously. You can create what you want as long as you're kind of within the boundaries of the mission, which are pretty much just to support people, educate people that have been impacted by addiction. So I always say we serve three main groups of people, and that's people who are struggling and their families. We really focus in on the families since that's who we are, that started it. That's kind of the lane that we've found more than anything is trying to educate families and help them with all the things that we've learned. So people that are or people that are struggling and their family members, people in recovery, helping to embrace that population, celebrate them, elevate them, and reduce stigma around the disease of addiction, and give them a space to share their stories and experiences and connect with others. And then people who have lost loved ones. And that was really probably the surprising group. That had not been my personal story, and nor Shannon, who started it. And but as we started putting things out there, they started showing up, and they started expressing their needs for resources and their needs for connection and their needs. So we started building programming around that. Yeah. What brings me here today in terms of why I'm in this field that I am today, and all, is like most people, it's our personal story that connects us to it. And so again, I was staying home, raising my children. But my oldest son, Jack, started, down a path somewhere in middle school. Things kind of started looking different. And he and I have done a lot of talks together. And it's always when we kind of he said, she said, where he'll talk a little, then I talk a little. And the very first time we did that, it was very eye-opening for me because he started saying all sorts of things that I didn't know in front of a big audience of people.
Sounds familiar.
That was super comfortable.
Yes.
So I learned that his first beverage, I think, that he tried was at age 12, which I had always was under the assumption of around 14. But learned that with a whole audience looking at me with, perhaps a little bit of judgment in their eyes. And I'm like, sorry, didn't know. But and that's, I think the beauty of that story, though, for me, is that I couldn't have been more present. Could not have been more present, to the detriment of my children, probably. I mean, I was just all up in their business. I knew everybody, everything. I had their friends were always at my house. Everybody was welcome. Everybody could spend the night. I was forever cooking a plate of brownies. I was driving every kid in Huntsville somewhere at some point in time. And, I just couldn't have been more present in my kids' lives. And I still ended up with a child addicted to dogs.
But, it's really interesting, though, because, Carrie and I have somewhat similar story to yours with family of addiction, and it's what changed the trajectory of our life, 24 years ago. But it's really fascinating over the years as we've been involved with families to see how the spectrum of people's parenting, one, you would think, okay, well, that's going to kind of really insulate you against having a child that's going to go towards addictive substances or this one really points you toward it, but it just doesn't work that way. One size
doesn't.
does not fit all.
It's really kind of mind-boggling, because you would really think that, and of course, there's research out there that shows protective factors and risk factors, and certainly my story should have put me more in the protective factor category, but it didn't, and I just think that's because everybody's unique individuals, and for some children, how I parented may have been a protective factor for some, but for a child like my oldest son, Jack, he was going to do what Jack was going to do no matter what. And Jack and I have a very good understanding. There's nothing I'll say here about him today that he would not be comfortable with me saying.
Right.
And he would agree with that. I mean, Jack was on his own path, and he was going to go do what Jack wanted to do, regardless of what we said, did, short of sending him away. But even if we'd done that, he would have still found it. He just would have found it with a different group someplace
Matthew,
else.
very similar. And even when his first little stint with sobriety, and he came home and we had a conversation with him, because we had lots of kids still left in the home, and we're like, Matt, what could we have done? What could we have done? And he's like, nothing. Now, I mean, would I change some things? I was going to go, sure. But he's just like, when I decided and when I got involved and when it became the thing that I wanted, you could not have stopped me.
I couldn't have stopped Jack. I agree 100%. I would not have been able to stop him. What I could have done is handle things a lot differently and better.
Yep.
With the knowledge I have today,
Yes.
I would have done things very different. I still don't know if the outcome would have been dramatically different in terms of what he did, but our family would have been a lot healthier in the process. I have two other children, two other sons. I have 3 sons, and it took a big toll on them, because we were not a very healthy family for quite some time. While this was all happening under our roof, or even when it wasn't under our roof.
Similar for us. The dynamic changed so quickly, and we were way behind on the learning curve. But fortunately, we found some resources, and then we became resources.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that's always one of my big messages to families, is that there's always something you can be doing. There's always something you can do, and that could be simply just educating yourself and helping yourself get tools to help you and help your other family members. And, you might not always be able to impact change in that person using all the time. Sometimes you can, but not always. But there's always other things you can be doing that can be helping you prepare. And if there is that moment of clarity, that moment of insight that person using has, that they want to do something different, wow, what a difference it would be if you were prepared for that.
Ready.
You were ready. You had the tools. You knew what the treatment programs were. You knew what your insurance would cover. You knew, so you're not operating from a place of crisis management, where in a moment of crisis, which I think everybody who's worked in this long enough knows, you may have a 6-hour, 3-hour window where they're willing to do something. That's not the time to start figuring it out. I mean, you need to have a bag packed, and who's going to take the dog, and
plus it's not the point at which you can start working on your own emotional stability either.
No. So to me, the more we can go out there and help families to prepare and be ready. But so he was on his path. He was, it started in high school, really escalated in high school. And, like every other kid, he just started out with partying and having fun and gravitating to a little riskier group of kids. And he was also a really gifted athlete, really young, and he grew really early. He was a big kid and strong kid. And so the high school coaches were, chomping at the bit to pull him up. And so as an 8th grader, he's getting pulled up to be on the varsity football team or the wrestling team or whatever. And so all of a sudden my 14-year-old's around a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds that have cars and are living very different lives. And that 17 or 18-year-old that's squared away and doing all the right things isn't really interested in a 14-year-old. But the kid that's out there that's, maybe struggling and looking for something, they're much more inclined to embrace that 14-year-old and pull them along. And so all of a sudden he's around a bunch of kids that are maybe not the kids he needed to be around. But now all of a sudden for me, this is a whole new group of kids. I don't really know anything about them. I don't know their parents. These aren't the kids he's grown up with. It's kind of a new world, and I'm trying to maneuver through that and figure that out with my husband. And then you've got a spouse, and you don't necessarily see everything the same. He'd had one set of experiences growing up and his own experiences with substances, and like many parents that grew up in the 70s, early 80s, there weren't the type of drugs that were being used didn't have the outcomes that they do today.
Right.
And so even if you'd had your own personal experiences with them, your friends weren't dying from them.
Correct.
Maybe they weren't living the potential that they should,
Yes.
but they weren't dying from them as a
Yes.
general rule. And and so we all came into it with very different experiences. I didn't have a lot of experience with substances at all, and then my husband had different,
Yes.
but not.
Serious.
Just sees it more as phases. This is just a
Yes.
phase. He'll grow out of it, like everybody did.
And
in our
even
generation.
the idea you shared a little earlier, just about the differences in personalities of people that get married.
Yeah.
You're right. For us, it took quite a while, a lot of work, a lot of education, a lot of therapy, a lot of groups to begin to understand how to become one in how we approached it and have a unified front.
So what year, how old is Jack?
Jack is 31 now. So he graduated high school in 10. So he was using, in the late 2007, 2008, 2009,
So in the middle
which was
of the
right when
opioid.
Oxycontin
Yes.
was really, really on the rise.
Yes.
And that was certainly his drug of choice. And, well, you know what? That's not fair. He would tell you if he were sitting here that, he would have taken anything anybody put in front of him. He probably, that wasn't his first choice, but it's the thing that brought him to his knees. It's the thing that brought the game to an end for sure.
Yeah.
And he liked them. So, that worked for him and his line. So, he graduated high school, barely got out, super smart kid, but just, skin of his teeth, got out of school. And we sent him off to Auburn. He wanted to go to Auburn. He gotten in. And all I could think about is, this kid needs a new challenge. He needs new people. We got to get him out of here.
Yeah.
He'll be challenged academically. He's a really bright person. And so I'm like, he'll find a new way. And I couldn't have been any more wrong. I mean, I went down there, set him up in the cutest apartment I could find and bought all new little cute things from IKEA and made sure it all looked perfect. And because in my head, as a parent who has a child that's struggling, it's like, okay, what can I control? Well,
Yep.
I'll control the environment. I'll make the environment look like all these other mamas are making their kids' environments look. And, but their stories were very different than Jack's. And Jack went down there and nothing went according to plan. And his first semester, we get the envelope that comes in the mail. He's reported to us that he had a 3.87 GPA, and we're like, oh my gosh, it worked. This is great. And we get this little envelope in the mail, and it's from Auburn University to the parents of, and we're like, this is it. He's going to have scholarship for next semester, and everything. This is the honor roll or dean's list or whatever. And it wasn't. He had a 0.7 GPA, and he was being put on academic probation or warning or whatever.
Yeah, it's really similar to our
Very
experience
similar.
too,
Yes.
in that it all fell apart in that first semester.
Yeah.
Wasn't at Auburn, it was in Alabama, but same pattern. It just accelerated, and we weren't there to see it.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's 3.5 hours down the road. He could be doing anything he wanted, and he kept us at arm's
Same
length.
here.
And now we sent him back for another semester, which again, any parent would look at that and be like, why? What were you thinking? And I'm like, there's just so many dynamics that go into that. I had 2 little kids at home, not little, they were high school and middle school and living their lives, and I wanted to be present for them. And he brought nothing but chaos into the home at this point in time. And I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, let's let him go figure it out down there. And so we, put what we thought at the time were some boundaries in place of what you have to do to get to stay. And and he didn't do it. He didn't do them.
Yeah.
So we gave him another semester because that's what a good enabling parent does. It's like, you got one more, son.
Well, it's that takes a while for us. I know for most folks, the idea of boundaries is we start with this concept. Oh, we'll set these, and they don't. It'll hurt them. But what we finally had to learn was if you set a really healthy boundary and hold it, it's going to be painful to you personally as a parent.
Oh, absolutely.
And it took us a while to figure that out.
And that's when you get to that, 2 parents getting on the same sheet of music.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
My husband didn't really want that. And I'm not going to say I wanted it, but I mean, we probably didn't want it in different ways maybe.
Yes.
And we were never on the same sheet of music when it came to that. I mean, that's what
Well, and I mean, so many of the parents that we're working with now are in that situation. You're like, okay, clearly this is not working. I just don't know what the alternative is.
Right.
Because, like you say, bringing them back into the home,
That wasn't
that's not going to work.
That wasn't
you
it.
know, so it's
to be
painful.
honest with you, at this point in the game, I did not know what the problem was.
Yep.
I did not know
The
that he had a
depth of-
substance. I didn't even know there was. I figured he was smoking a little pot
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
drinking too
Yeah.
much. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
I really thought it was more mental health,
Yes.
lying, chronic lying, which
Right.
now I understand why.
Yeah.
But at the time, I mean, you know, you could be like, Jack, the sky is blue, and he'd
Yes.
be like, oh no, it's not, it's green,
Yeah.
and he, you know, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
So there was like all these like inconsistent things that
Yeah.
just never lined up. Nothing ever made sense.
There's
Nothing,
always a story.
there's always a story. There's always and so, but
Drama.
I never entertained substances.
Yes.
Just never did. Just never crossed my mind, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Which now sounds completely ignorant. Like I just what? You know, how could you not? But I didn't. And so he did poorly the second semester. We gave him a summer to fix it all. And he did. He actually like made some pretty decent grades that summer. I don't know how, but it was enough to keep him enrolled at Auburn. They kept him for another semester and it bought him another semester from us. But that fall, things really fell apart for him. And without, you know, he tells that part of the story, not me. But, you know, it all fell apart that fall. And that continued into this early spring. And on March 12th of 2012, he called home and he just said, "I can't do this anymore." And there's more to the story than that, but that's enough to get to the gist of it. He was done. And I always tell people, it's not like Jack just woke up one morning and decided, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, you know, the walls were closing in.
Yep.
On many different fronts, you know, from financial to legal to school to, you know, it was all
Enough
coming
bottoms were
in.
coalescing.
You know, there was a lot closing in on him. I knew none of it, but it was enough for him to call home and ask for help. And so, he went to treatment and stayed in treatment for 60 days, an inpatient, and then he went to Atlanta and went to a sober living there and lived there for a year. And just kind of started slowly rebuilding a life in recovery. And he's been sober for 11 years now.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, he's, you know, I tell people all the time, he's a unicorn out there because not many people go to treatment.
Right.
He was a
No.
week into being 20 years old when he went to treatment. So basically a
It's
19-year-old.
both early and it took,
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
unusual. Let me ask you something because I think this is really important. The fact that 60 days treatment, which is actually even harder to get now with the insurance industry, but then staying and going to sober living immediately after and then being willing to stay in that system for a year seems to be a key, especially with what we're dealing with now with the opioid epidemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, what would he say about that? How have y'all talked about that, about how that's impacted the long-term recovery for him?
Yeah.
Was it really important, does he
Yeah.
think?
I mean, we've talked extensively about it. And yes, I mean, first of all, the first 60 days was an inpatient treatment. And I didn't mention earlier, but he had a significant loss in his life, a friend who passed away his senior year in high school. And you know, that his use escalated substantially after that. And he carried that with him when he went to college. So that 60 days in treatment gave him the opportunity to work on that grief, work on that, you know, and so these programs where you go for 14 days or even 28 days, he wouldn't have had that opportunity to do that. So we were really fortunate that we found a place and our insurance, you know, covered some of it. You know, and even that though, those are like the financial hits. Like nobody plans to send their 19-year-old and have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, liquidate their college funds to send them to rehab.
That was
you know?
Matt. We used his entire college funds.
Yeah.
For
when Jack finished
treatment.
his treatment, his college fund was emptied.
Yep.
So you know, and he had like, you know, a handful of credits
Yep.
with low grades to show for it. So there wasn't much to show for that. But you do what you have to do. And so, you know, that made the most sense at that point in time to do, and I'd do it again.
Yep.
But so really good 60 days of treatment that really addressed his specific needs was step one. Yeah. And then a year living in a structured, accountable, supportive environment that, you know what I always say, it's like it gave him time to heal.
Yes.
But almost more importantly, it taught him how to live life as a sober person.
Yes.
I was going to say
He had
the
to completely change his life.
the whole
Yes.
12-step idea of living life on life's terms for
Yes.
the first time.
He had to learn, I can comfortably tell you, 11 years later, he grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, pretty much. He moved there at 6 months old, had the same group of friends from kindergarten through senior year of high school, and then a big group of them headed on down to Auburn. You would think he would have, a circle of friends from his childhood. Zero. Every friend he has today, I would say 95% of them are people that have come into his life since he's been sober.
Yeah.
Or maybe now in his professional life some, or through his marriage and whatever. The further he gets away, his world has opened up outside of that. But for the first 5-7 years of his recovery, I would comfortably say that the vast majority of his friendships, connections with people were all people in recovery, and still very much so.
Yeah.
But you have to learn how to live life as a sober person. He had to completely reinvent who he was and what that looked like. And I remember when he was in treatment, the gentleman, a lot of people know him, Tim Hilton, who's recently passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such an influential person in my life in terms of my learning. But one of the things he taught us as parents, he was like, you got to give them some space because they got to figure out who they are. They knew who they were as a person using substances. And Jack had a very clear persona of who he was and what he looked like and how he dressed. But what does he look like? He's not my little kid anymore, wearing the little clothes that mom dressed him in, and he's not the guy that he thought he was. So who is he now? And and Tim tells the story about how he was Cowboy Tim for a while. He said, he goes, I was trying to figure out who I was, and I wore a big belt buckle and a hat and my Wrangler jeans and my boots, and for a period of time I was, Cowboy Tim because I had to become somebody, and that seemed to work. He goes, and eventually that kind of wore away, and I ultimately ended up the guy I am today, wearing what I wear today, and but it took several iterations of what that looked like. And I remember going over to Atlanta, and he's wearing clothes that I'd never seen him wear before, and he just had a whole different vibe going on than what I'd ever seen. And I'm kind of like, and I remember how important it was to hear that from Tim, because my first inclination is to be like, Jack,
we got to change you
to the
back.
store. We got to get you back. Where's your button down? Where's your polo shirt? Where's your, and he's like, this is who I am now, and had I not had the education that I had and had the privilege of learning those things, that would have been my inclination to go in and try to change him back to what I thought, let's get him back to where he was.
Yeah.
Well, he was never going to be where he was.
Yeah.
Any of that.
Right.
The little kid stuff, the older kid stuff,
And that's one of the, I think, learning curves for loved ones, parents especially, is we're probably not going to be the most pivotal people in their recovery. We probably got to get out of the way.
Got to get out of the way.
Anything.
Yeah, I think that was huge. That was being able to step back and letting those people understand that without Jack's recovery, none of it's going to happen. Yeah. So I need to get out of his way and go let those people in recovery that could mentor him and guide him and direct him, let them do their job.
And just encourage. Find things to
love
encourage.
Them. Be there, love them.
And that other dynamic then enters, well, if I'm not the primary person, what does detachment with love look like, right? Well, it doesn't mean I don't love them anymore. Doesn't mean I don't relate to them anymore. I just need to learn differently how to do that.
Yeah.
And that's a learning curve for parents.
Oh, it's a big learning curve for parents, because I always say too that, you've gone from, especially with his age, so he was 19 or basically 19 years old when he went to treatment. So I'm still dealing with just like a older adolescent basically becoming an adult. Those 18 to 24-year-olds, I've raised 3 boys. Those are some wacky years, they're all over the place, and their judgment is horrific, and they do stupid things, and and in the best of circumstances they do those things. So in addition to dealing with a young man who's learning how to live a life in recovery and all that comes with that, which was a completely foreign territory to me, I knew nothing about it, nor did my husband. In addition to that, I'm just dealing with a 22-year-old who's being a not so smart 22-year-old.
Well, we say in our groups all the time, and to individuals, nobody grows up, gets married, and has a family thinking they're going to need this book of knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. And so
tell us what Jack's doing now.
Jack's done some good work. So he, while he was still in his sober living, he went back and went to Troy Online and got his undergraduate in psychology during that time. And then he was working at Costco as the gas station guy during that time, and it was the best job ever. It was just awesome. And then he transitioned over to University of Alabama and became a member of their collegiate recovery community.
Well, see, this is where you are starting to make wiser decisions, getting away from the Auburn.
Auburn just didn't have one at the time.
Okay,
but
whatever.
Might have pushed it at that point. But
So tell us a little bit about what the present and future looks like for Not One More Alabama, because some exciting things kind of going on.
we have some, So one of our big things that we have going on, when you say the future of NOMA, is going to look very different than what we have today. We've had an incredible gift that's been given to us by the Damson family in Huntsville, and a lot of people in Huntsville know them. They owned for many, many, many years, a couple of generations, the Honda dealerships, the Acura dealerships in the Huntsville area, and just a loved family in Huntsville, a very philanthropic family that have been very involved in many philanthropy initiatives over the years in the area. And so anyway, they've donated to us a building right smack dab in the middle of town. It's just an incredible location. It was an old bowling alley that many people loved in Huntsville, the Monarch Bowling Alley that I think many people in Huntsville grew up bowling at. And they bought that building, I don't want to misspeak, but maybe 20 years ago, something like that, and turned it into a warehouse, and they've used it as kind of an extension of the dealership, and washed cars in it, and just used it as a space. It was right across the street from one of their dealerships, but they decided that it was time for it to have a new use, and so they've donated the building and some additional funding to help us renovate the building, and so we are going to be building owners sometime later this year when it actually takes place. And so we're going to turn that into a recovery community center. And
so what will be some of the components of the center? What
it's so exciting. We're just thrilled. We actually held a focus group dinner back in March and invited a big group of people in recovery and just said, we got this space and we've got, passion and desire, so tell us what we need to put in here. And they went to town and they told us that we're like, what did you need when you were, in your first few months of recovery, and maybe you went to treatment and came back to Huntsville, and what wasn't here that you needed? And maybe you're somebody with 15 years of recovery and you're just struggling to connect. What would you need in this? And they just filled pages and pages of ideas and things. So it's going to be a lot of different things. We're still going to serve those same three populations of people in there. At its core, it'll be a place for people to just gather. It'll just be a place where we want, think of like a really cool coffee shop, and that you could just come in, and set up your laptop and sit and, if you're having a hard day, or maybe you're having a good day, but you just want to be around people, but you don't want to go where you're going to have things that aren't good for you. So you can just come and drink coffee and hang out and fellowship with other people. And we'll have lots of just activities. We'll have a big wall of TVs, so football games and, NFL draft, whatever, any opportunity to order some pizza in and have a
sober community.
Have a sober community event.
Well, we always try to end with just one simple thing, is for someone that's watching, whether they're struggling with substance use disorder or they're a loved one or a family member, what's the one thing you'd like to say to them? And is there a way they could easily get in touch with your organization?
Easily get in touch, yes. Mail, MAIL, at notonemorealabama.org is our email address. It comes straight to me. So they send it to there, that I'll get it, and if we'll run with it from there. That's the easiest way to get it, is email. That's just the simplest way to reach us. So mail at notonemorealabama.org. And then what would I say? There's so many things to say, but I go back to everything that knowledge is power. And the more people know, the more they're armed with how to tackle this disease that most people are wholly unequipped to handle. And so I just encourage people, just keep learning, go out there, find, go to everything, go to any group you can find, go to any webinar you see advertised, and just start educating yourself, because if you just take a little nugget from this and a little nugget from that, a little nugget from that, you're going to, before you know it, you're going to have a whole basket full of stuff to pull from.
So,
Fantastic.
Patty, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sorry we're out of time because there's so many other things I would
could talk all
love
day.
love to talk about. But thanks for being here today. Thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for being my friend. And thanks for the sacrifice of your time and your talents and your passion for all these years. You have impacted a multitude of people. And just coming from the Birmingham space, just to tell you that NOMA has such a reputation, a great reputation. Anytime your name is mentioned or the organization is mentioned, it is with great praise. So you should be very proud of that. And we know it's because of all those late nights. And
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. We've
Yeah.
worked hard. It's been a labor of love, but it's important to do something important, and hopefully we'll make a difference and help some people out, and provide a space for something that wasn't there before, and encourage other people to do the same. So
can't wait to hear about the recovery center.
it's
as
exciting.
as
It
it
keeps me up
grows.
at night. Makes me panic. I don't know how we're going to pay for it all. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
We'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
thank you for
Yes.
having me, and thank you
Yes.
for your friendship,
Yeah.
and thank you for mentoring. I learned so much from you all the time, and I feel like y'all are our big sister, big brother organization, and I'm constantly seeking advice and direction. So thank you for
Looking
all
forward
that
to
you
great
give to
projects
us.
ahead.
Folks, thanks for joining us this time on APC Recovery Cafe, and we'll see you again soon.
One of the things that APC is known for is being a connector, because we're stronger together.
Not only are we there for those who are suffering through substance use disorder, but we're there for family members, and we really take our job seriously.
We all have personal reason why we're in this field. We're changing people's lives one community at a time.